Thank you, Mr. Rice and Ranking Member Brady, for spearheading this effort today to address some of the myths and misinformation that we're hearing from our Democrat colleagues when it comes to reforming our tax code. And I'd like to take a few minutes today to address their claims that the wealthy don't pay their, and I quote, fair share. We've heard this many, many times throughout hearings in this committee and in the Budget Committee. The wealthy don't pay their fair share. Now, I don't know what they think fair share is. I'd like to hear their definition of fair share at some point. But I assume that they mean that our tax code should be more progressive. And what do I mean by progressive? When we think of a progressive tax code, we're generally saying that those with higher incomes would pay more than the poorest and most vulnerable families in the country. And I'm talking higher incomes in real dollars, but also as a percentage of income. So again, progressive code, those who are earning more are paying a higher percentage of their income than those at the lower end of the economic scale, of the lower end of earnings. So let's look at the facts, and I'm going to quote a few facts here today to see whether we do have a progressive tax code. And the answer, as you will see, is that we certainly have a progressive tax code. The higher end earners are paying a higher percentage of their earnings, and we have one of the most progressive tax codes in the world. Now, you wouldn't believe that when you hear Democrats talk, but the facts are what they are. These are figures from the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation, which is sort of our congressional scorekeepers. So this is the Joint Committee on Taxation. They just issued a report this year. And here's what they found. Taxpayers earning $20,000 to $30,000. So if you're a taxpayer, you earn between $20,000 and $30,000 annually. You pay an average of about 3.1% of your income in federal taxes. Again, taxpayers earning 20 to 30 pay about 3.1% of their income in federal taxes. Someone earning between 75 and 100,000 per year paid an average of 15.8%. Again, that's from 3.1% to 15.8% on average federal taxes paid by those who earn 75,000 to 100,000 per year. And if you're a taxpayer with over 1 million in earnings annually, you're paying an average of 31.5% of your income in federal taxes. You dig into it a little further, you find that many of the lowest income earners, the only federal tax they pay are payroll taxes like Medicare and Social Security. They don't pay income tax at all. If you look at the 2020 figures, 60.6% of U.S. households had no federal income tax liability at all. 60% of U.S. households paid zero in federal income tax in 2020. That's the definition of progressive. The more someone earns, the more that they pay in taxes. And if Democrats, if you want a tax code where the burden of taxation is largely paid by higher income households, we already have that. And as I mentioned earlier, the United States has long had one of the most progressive tax codes among developed nations, and that's according to the OECD rankings. Data analyzed by another organization, the Tax Foundation, shows that the top 1% pay 40% of all income taxes. So all federal taxes that are paid that go to the IRS, 40% of all of those taxes are paid by the top 1% earners in the United States. The top 10% in earnings pay 70% of all income taxes. Now, here's what the Democrats also would never admit. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, after the Republican tax reform, the rich pay a larger share of total income taxes. We keep hearing from Democrats that they don't pay enough and that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a giveaway to the rich, but the facts are that they pay a larger share of the total income taxes now than they did before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Even CNN admitted this, and I quote, this is a CNN quote, "The top 1% paid $615.7 billion in federal income taxes. It's about 40% of the total in 2018. This is CNN, $615.7 billion paid in federal income taxes, about 40% of the total in 2018. CNN said that's the highest percentage since 2001, when it was 33.2%, according to the IRS data. Republican tax reform not only resulted in an increased share of taxes paid by the wealthy, but we all know it also created the strongest economy in a generation, with record low unemployment, strong wage growth, and a resurgence of investment in America. And that resulted in the lowest poverty rate ever in the history of the country. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act lifted more people out of poverty than at any other time in our history. But under the reconciliation bill that Democrats proposed, low and middle income households will end up paying more than they do now under the pro-growth progressive system that we already have. Studies have found that households making far less than $400,000 will shoulder the burden of a higher corporate tax rate proposed in this tax and spend agenda. They will pay more for goods and services as a result of the higher corporate rate and as a result of the inflation that we're seeing now. In addition, increased excise taxes on certain common household purchases will also take more money from the pockets of hardworking low and middle income Americans. According to the Tax Foundation, raising these rates will reduce the progressivity of the U.S. tax system by as much as 40%. So the irony behind this agenda is that in their crusade to ban wealth and stifle opportunity, they're focused in on income. This results in treating someone who makes $400,000 per year the same as someone who makes $50 million per year. I'd like to know, how do Democrats think that is fair? But I think instead of trying to divide the American people with false claims and demagoguing, Democrats should focus on restoring our pre-pandemic economic strength. We could be seeing a robust recovery if we were implementing the right policies, and I hope that we get back to that. Thank you.